Okay, good evening everyone. Merhaba and welcome to Yunus Emre Institute London, and welcome to the launch of An Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia with Nicholas Mackey. For those who are joining us for the first time, we are Turkey's cultural institute, and with over 90 branches. We are the London branch, and we run an array of events in terms of promoting Turkish arts and culture. You can learn Turkish music and traditional arts here, and you can attend many other fascinating talks and book launches such as this one. And tonight we are very delighted to have Nicholas with us, and we are very excited to hear more about his journey in Northern Mesopotamia. Just to give you an idea of this event, so there will be a talk that will run approximately for 40 minutes, and then you will get to ask your questions afterwards. It will run about 15 minutes, and then we will welcome you all for book signing and enjoying Turkish refreshments. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome for Nicholas.
Traveling. It leaves you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller. Bin Battuta. I have not told the half of what I saw, for I knew I would not be believed. Marco Polo. This is a great moment when you see, however distant, the goal of your wandering, the thing which has been living in your imagination, suddenly becomes part of the tangible world. It matters not how many ranges, rivers, or parching dusty ways may lie between you. It is yours now, forever. Freya Stark. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. L.P. Hartley. When embracing the enchantment of times past, let the vibe of Mesopotamia draw you closer. That's something I wrote. Merhaba ve hoş geldiniz. If any Irish people are present, Dia Guiv agus Cade Mila Folcha. Hello and welcome on this chilly evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Nicholas Mackey, and I'm the author of An Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia. In addition to being a travelogue, my book is also a memoir where art, history, archaeology, poetry, and the exploration of ideas receive attention throughout the narrative. I'm humbled that you're all present here right now, that you have taken the time to hear me speak and talk about my story. My sincere thanks to all of you for being here in this iconic setting, the Yunus Emre Institute here in London. In this place of culture and learning, permit me to quote from the president of your institute, Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman Ali. Aware that culture plays an important role in establishing trust and enhancing dialogue between differing societies, with the understanding that horizons are not far. And, as the master poet himself, Yunus Emre, beautifully expressed his worldview to foster friendship and cultural exchange between Türkiye and other countries. Such exemplary sentiments of the Institute on the interconnectedness of us human beings across the miles that may lie between us are echoed in a variety of ways from the following Irish Nobel literary laureates. W.B. Yeats said, "There are no strangers here, only friends you haven't yet met." George Bernard Shaw wrote, "I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community and as long as I live, it's my privilege to do for it whatever I can. And then, if we winter this out, we can summer anywhere. This concise line from Seamus Heaney's poem, The Cure at Troy, speaks to enduring hardships with hope and resilience, emphasizing the power of cultural expression to bridge divides and build understanding among diverse communities. But we are, after all, in the Yunus Emre Institute, named after Yunus Emre, as I'm sure you all know, the celebrated 13th and 14th century Turkish Sufi poet and mystic, who is celebrated for his lyrical works and his divan, his collected poems, which emphasize universal love, human unity, and spirituality. Permit me to end this bit of my talk, therefore, with the following quotation from Yunus Emre. Come, let us all be friends for once. Let us make life easy on us. Let us be lovers and loved ones. The earth shall be left to no one. I offer this presentation to you, noting there are connections between Türkiye and Ireland stretching all the way back 6,000 years. I'll be discussing some of these links later in my talk. I hope I shall demonstrate due sensitivity to my chosen subject that I, an Irishman, have written on and am now talking about my travels in Türkiye. And talking of the Yunus Emre Institute, I'd like to thank the director here, Dr. Mehmet Karakus, and his wonderful staff, including Shero Banu and colleagues, for kindly giving me this opportunity to avail of this marvellous venue and to share the evening with you. I'm also grateful to my publisher, Unicorn, for believing in me and their marvellous support over the past 12 months. My heartfelt thanks to my dear family and friends for their support and encouragement. It has meant so much to me. And in particular, I'd like to mention my wife, Rashida, who performed a life-saving initial edit where, I have to confess, my overly exuberant Celtic verbiage was rendered into a much clearer and readable manuscript. In truth, she cut my verbose initial draft in half. 135,000 words down to 65,000. Rashida's positive energy and sensitive encouragement kept me going when at times I thought I was losing my way. And now, as Shakespeare might have said, without further ado, let's get started. I'd now like to talk about the journey that has led to the publication of this becoming a reality. It's only taken me 5 years. It could be summed up in one sentence as explore the enduring wonder that is the story of Northern Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, from an Irish perspective. Let's go further and reduce it to one word, journey, with perhaps the attributes of a pilgrimage. For me, this is a passage that began way back in childhood in Dublin, where I was born. Since then, this journey of mine has passed through various stages and countries: adolescence, adulthood, friendships, marriage, family, career, retaining that most valuable of possessions, good health, middle age, being made redundant more than once, running a business, not always easy, falling over sometimes and failing, then getting back up, dusting oneself off, as the saying goes, and carrying on. Years ticking by and always busy with stuff, struggling to give expression to that inner voice that remains silent for too long. Throughout my life, I've often been observed with a notebook and pen in hand, forever scribbling bits and bobs, ideas, scrambled poetic lines, exciting openings and chapters to books as yet unpublished. I have drawers and boxes at home stuffed with these unrealized dreams. And yet, for once, when I scribbled 50 pages of notes, and I mean scribbled, as we were on the move during this marvelous trip to Northern Mesopotamia, South-east Türkiye, back in May 2019, shared with Rashida and two dear friends, Farai and Suat, who helped organize this expedition, for which I will always be grateful. Little did I know that these squiggles of mine on paper would one day morph into a book. But this journey goes much further back in time. All those years ago, as a kid, I remember sitting on my father's knee as he enchanted me with enthralling tales from long ago about Zeus, king of the gods, who resided on Mount Olympus, with a passion for hurling thunderclaps through the heavens. The remarkable feats of Alexander the Great, and how he carved out a vast empire. St. Paul of Tarsus and his journeys around the ancient world, including Athens, Rome, Patara, and Antioch. The amazing exploits of the legendary Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh. And there was Xerxes, who lived in splendor in Babylon, with its hanging gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the world. There wasn't a lot of money in the family at that time, and we're talking about early 1960s Ireland, but I knew I was fortunate, as there was also always a healthy stash of books at home. But I was hungry for more. I was so enthused with reading that I braved going out on cold winter evenings to borrow what I could from our local public library. And I also developed the fine art of sneaking into bookshops and browsing for hours undetected. To be free to read. How uplifting that mantra was for me throughout those early years. As far as venturing overseas was concerned, it had to be done in my imagination. But nevertheless, a fire had been lit deep in my psyche, and I vowed one day I would explore these distant horizons and learn more about their story. But there was something else at play, and it arose from being Irish. While growing up in Dublin, I became aware there was something embedded in the national consciousness, which acted as a siren call to journey overseas. Prevailing social and economic conditions with their roots in a colonial past dating back 850 years had contributed to Ireland's major export. Its people. Emigration was an established norm where men, women and children in vast numbers over many generations upped sticks to create new lives for themselves in search of a better future abroad. My upbringing encouraged me, therefore, to develop a perspective that looked beyond Ireland's shores and instilled in me an unquenchable desire to travel. Now, voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find. Walt Whitman. Throughout my life subsequently, I've often sought to satisfy that desire to wander. But I had to be patient until my 7th decade of existence, however, before I was able to cast eyes on Northern Mesopotamia. And lo, in 2019, accompanied by my wife and our 2 dear friends, I embarked on a memorable journey throughout this remarkable part of the world. Please excuse the title. This was my notebook. It was a present from my niece, and yes, this came with me on the trip, and I took about 50 pages of notes. And when I said earlier that I scribbled, I will give you an example of what I wrote. And this is what... So, I think it makes doctors' handwriting, I'm sorry if there are any doctors in the audience, but it makes doctors' handwriting look neat. That's another example. And even, oh, by the way, yes, I've got another kind of pointer. By the way, I used to be a teacher, so once a teacher, always a teacher, so forgive me. I even, influenced by, Japanese-style poetry, the tanka design, 5 lines, although that's not exactly according to the tanka design. Our flight into eternity starts with our imagination unleashed. And definitely on this trip, I can assure you my imagination was unleashed. Now, the clue, of course, is in the title of the book about the Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia. And what I just want to draw your attention to the fact that Ireland here is in the northwest corner of Europe, one extreme, and Turkey, or Türkiye, is on the other side, the southeastern part. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to Carrowkeel, which is in County Sligo in northwest of Ireland, and another famous and iconic location in Turkey called Göbeklitepe. And believe it or not, there is a connection between Carrowkeel and Anatolia, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, I just mentioned Carrowkeel, and here in Carrowkeel, you have a passage tomb. And this is on the near a place called Loch Arrow. And just a second. Yes. This photo was taken by my son Justin, and it's an important archaeological site which was originally excavated in 1911 by the Irish explorer, naturalist and writer Robert Lloyd Prager. Carrowkeel is part of a larger landscape within County Sligo with upwards of 100 passage tombs in the area. What's interesting here is that they have done studies on the remains of people who were buried here 6,000 years ago. They've run a DNA test, and in the DNA analysis, they have found that there are links between the people that were here and Anatolia of 6,000 years ago, which means there was some kind of link between these two remote parts of Europe, if you like, either end of Europe, all those years ago. Now I just want to give you an overview of the itinerary that we started out here in Kalkan in the province of Antalya, through to Antalya itself, the city. The bit that's marked in green, of course, is by plane, and then by red is on the road here through Antakya, Gaziantep, through the Euphrates, the Ataturk Dam, then Göbeklitepe, Harran, through Mardin, Morzafaran, Midyat, and ending up in Diyarbakir. Right, let's start off in Kalkan. Kalkan, a seaside village in the region of Antalya, population 3,900. I've been reliably informed by a local accountant. Kalkan, a haven of splendor and harmony, where gentle breezes bearing the scents of wild flowers drift down the hillside on their way to the wideness of the turquoise sea on the Lycian shoreline of southern Türkiye. For my wife and I, this sanctuary, blessed with tranquility and friendship, serves as a Shangri-La, a welcome retreat from life's tribulations. There's that magical moment after flying into Dalaman during the daylight hours when we are driven from the airport along a scenic highway, the D400, past endless olive groves, fruit orchards where countless apples and pomegranates grow, vast forests covering the many hills that come down to the road, huge mountains in the far distance with villages to be seen in the intervening valleys, and all bathed in that bright, uplifting Turkish sunshine. Feelings of enchantment creep back into the soul, and it acts as a welcome balm from living in a cold and damp climate on the northwest corner of the European continent. But a further thrill awaits us. Our inbound journey nearly done, when the taxi crests the hill overlooking Kalkan and the adjacent Kalamar Bay, we still gasp in childlike wonder at the sight of this place next to the amazing shininess of the sea. I mentioned there Kalamar Bay, and here is a shot of Kalamar Bay, which is right next to, of course, Kalkan. And now to something practical. I call this the chef de cuisine from the Kalkan market. Every Thursday we have a covered market in Kalkan, and my wife and I always make a beeline for the gözleme, a delicious pancake, either sweet or savory. Moving on. Now, I have a confession to make. I'm into what my family and friends lovingly describe as old piles of rocks. Normally, when I leap in excitement when I hear about these old piles of rocks, I can hear suppressed groans from other members of the family. And my goodness, isn't one spoiled for choice in the region? At a rough count, there are more than 15 archaeological sites that are nearby to Kalkan, one of which is Patara, which this is a picture from, but there are many others. I'll just mention just a few, don't worry. Sidima, Kalinda, Xanthos, Pinara, Tlos, and Kekova, but there are many more. The one I'm going to talk about now is this one here. This is called the Arch of Modestus, and it's in Patara. Patara comes from the Hittite word patar, meaning basket, an ancient Lycian city. It was a prominent maritime and cultural hub famed for its oracle of Apollo and as the birthplace of my namesake, St. Nicholas, the inspiration for Santa Claus. Historically significant for its role in Lycian governance, with an early form of democratic assembly, it also served as a vital port in antiquity. This is the main street in Patara. And this is the amphitheatre, which is, as you can see, quite well preserved. And then just behind here, that would have been the stage area. Behind it, you have this building here, which is called the Bouleuterion. It's like translates as the Senate House or the meeting chamber. It's interesting to note that Patara is considered an early model of republican governance. It hosted the Lycian League, a confederation of city-states that practiced a representative democracy. Each city sent representatives to the League's assembly in proportion to its size, ensuring both equality and fair representation. It's interesting to note that in 1776, the founders of the United States took this Lycian model to serve as a blueprint to assist in framing the governance of their newly established nation. But Patara is also well known for its amazing beach, 18 kilometers in length. And it also is a natural reserve, and it serves as a critical nesting ground for the endangered loggerhead turtles. One other local place that isn't signposted is the Delikamer Aqueduct, again within easy driving distance. And in this photograph, you can just get a glimpse of it here on the hillside. The Lycians first constructed the Patara or Delikamer aqueduct, and Delikamer, I'm given to understand, means the arch with the hole, which the Romans later improved, linking a remote freshwater source inland in the hills of what is now the town of Islamlar via an ingenious reverse siphon pipeline, thus enabling water to flow uphill over the valley of Delikamer, not far from present-day Kalkan, and on to Patara, a distance of 22.5 kilometers. This was an amazing feat of engineering from antiquity, which ensured this aqueduct could carry water from a remote source and adequately serve the needs of the population of Patara. Not only that, but the planners of this watercourse ensured that it could be maintained. I'll show you some more pictures of it now, of Delikamer. This shows you the route it takes there through this part of the countryside. For scale, I put a pound coin here. I don't know if you can see that at the bottom of the picture, to give you an idea of the size of the circumference. And also the engineers who constructed this all those years ago thoughtfully put doorways in the wall supporting the aqueduct so people could pass back and forth. I've just included, this is Calamar Bay again. I'm just a sucker for, beautiful shots when I've got my camera on me. And basically, with your back to the Delikamer aqueduct, this is the view that you see looking across Calamar Bay. And since we're in the middle of, almost the middle of winter, I thought I'd include this, just a picture of some yellow flowers, some sunlight. Right, back to our map now, and we're now going to go from Antalya to Adana. We're going to meet our tour guide, Murad, and then we're going to travel on to, I'm going to take you to Gaziantep. That is our tour guide and fixer par excellence, Murad. Was with us the whole time. An incredible knowledge of the local area, and speaks, if I remember correctly, 4 languages. Right, Gaziantep. This, as you can see, for those of you who may have been there or familiar with it, this is Gaziantep Castle. Let's take a look at Gaziantep, a city of 2 million people, and here's the castle in all its glory. Sadly, it was badly damaged as a result of the February 2023 earthquake. Gaziantep is in south-east Türkiye and is one of the country's oldest continuously inhabited cities, dating back to the Stone Age. Gaziantep has been witness to the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Persians, and the Romans. Here's another shot of the castle at Gaziantep. And something else now that Gaziantep is famous for. The panorama. This is the panorama from the top of the battlements of the castle. Yes. If you've a sweet tooth, Gaziantep is the place for you. This is a serving of konefe, here on the left. and you can see obviously the pistachios, ice cream on the right. It's phyllo pastry, unsalted cream cheese, smothered in syrup and pistachios. Other sweet dishes such as katmer and baklava are to be found in Gaziantep. Our accommodation was the Hishvahan Hotel, which the entrance was through here, and it is a former caravanserai. As you know, the word caravanserai comes from the old Persian word meaning caravan palace. These were roadside inns in days of old where travellers could be accommodated while being fed and watered during the course of an extended journey. If these travellers had goods or animals with them, they would be held in safekeeping. Caravanserais also served as a means of quarantine in times of plague. They're to be found dotted around on the various routes that made up the Silk Road, stretching from China to Europe. Next, I want to talk to you about a remarkable place in Gaziantep, and this is the Zugma Mosaic Museum. It's the largest of its kind in the world. It opened its doors in 2011, and the internal space, if you're interested, 1,700 square meters. What I'm going to do now is take you through some of the mosaics that are on show in this museum. I want to talk about this particular mosaic. It's known as the Zugma Gypsy Girl. I want you to get your imagination working now. Just imagine a sun-filled scene from 2,000 years ago, and the owners of a fine Roman villa on a hillside overlooking the glistening river Euphrates are seated under a canopy in their courtyard garden. Their residence would have been filled with mosaics similar to those seen in the Zugma Museum. Fast forward to the 20th century. The striking gypsy girl work of art was observed on the floor of a dining room in a villa. This remarkable find came about through sheer happenstance, and you can picture the sense of wonder of the excavators who came across this gypsy girl. This mosaic is just over 78 centimeters in length and 52 centimeters in height. This unique example of mosaic art is mesmerizing, as the eyes seem to follow you about the room, and it's been called the Mona Lisa of antiquity. But of course, it predates Da Vinci's masterpiece by 1,500 years. Now, in this part of the world, you will hear reference to two areas that are to be found here. One of them is the Fertile Crescent, and the other is Mesopotamia, as from the title of the book. Let's just spend a bit of time on that for a moment. Here we're looking at the Fertile Crescent, and here Murad was in the museum just demonstrating this area here that is the Fertile Crescent. And in my notes here it says it's a region in the Middle East stretching from the Persian-Arabian Gulf through modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Jordan and Egypt, known for its rich fertile land and crescent shape. It's where early agriculture, civilization and writing developed. And then moving on to Mesopotamia. that is all of Mesopotamia. And the bit that we were visiting was northern Mesopotamia, which of course lies inside Türkiye. And Mesopotamia means the land between rivers. The next part of our journey, we went from Gaziantep to the town of Halfeti, along the Euphrates, up through Adıyaman onto Karta, Mount Nemrut, and then round to Urfa here. We also, by the way, stopped off at the Ataturk Dam. This is the river Euphrates, a glistening turquoise thread of water meandering through the Mesopotamian plain. It's the longest river in Western Asia. We stopped momentarily at a place that was the perfect viewing point overlooking Halfeti and the river. We emerged from the air-conditioned coolness of our bus, and all four of us stood blinking in the bright afternoon sun, gazing down at the dark, turquoise-coloured, full-bodied river only a short distance away. But this was not any old river. This was the Euphrates, with all its legendary connotations. There was silence as the four of us took in this amazing view. A sense of wonder hung in the air as we realized we were looking at this ancient waterway for the first time in our lives. I mentally pinched myself at being able to take in the significance of a river I'd only ever read or heard about since I was a lad growing up in Ireland. I remember my father bringing home books from Trinity College Dublin Library and showing me pictures of this river of historical importance. But now, decades later, I was standing on this promontory, looking out over the river. It struck me that this was not a still picture that I, as a 10-year-old boy, was looking at, but instead more than half a century had zipped by, and I'm now a 65-year-old man gazing in childlike astonishment at the sight of the actual Euphrates. And this prompted me to write the following: flowing waters, soul-soothing, creating and recreating reflections, bearing our dreams over time. Now, near where we were, as I mentioned a moment ago, there was the town of Halfeti, and it has been partly submerged. And here you can see that there is a minaret poking out from the waters of the river, because I believe that the mosque that it's attached to has now been submerged. Now, when we talk about the Euphrates, we have to talk about Gilgamesh. And this is the Gilgamesh tablet. It's a heroic tale based on oral traditions dating back at least 4,000 years, maybe even 5,000 years, based on the keen memories of storytellers going back in distant time. It was first recorded in cuneiform form circa 2000 BC in the Sumerian language. It's 76,000 words long, the length of a novel. And as you can see, the form of writing here, this is known as cuneiform writing. The epic follows the adventures of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, who is 2/3 god and 1/3 human, and encompasses a huge spectrum of tales filled with gods, kings, and divine or human characters. Episodes of courage, slaughter, cruelty, and the story of the Great Flood, but also love, friendship, self-doubt, realization of mortality, and so much more, which includes some of the following: the meeting of and deep friendship of the two main protagonists, Gilgamesh, a king, and Enkidu, a wild man later tamed. the tale of the cedar forest and the slaying of Humbaba, the king of the cedar forest, the tale of Ishtar, goddess of war and erotic love, the bull of heaven, the death of Enkidu as prescribed by the gods, and the great flood. Then Siduri, a goddess, spoke some home truths to the headstrong and narcissistic Gilgamesh, advising him to live life as follows. Gilgamesh, where do you roam? You will not find the eternal life you seek when the gods created humankind. They appointed death for humankind, kept eternal life in their own hands. So, Gilgamesh, let your stomach be full. Day and night enjoy yourself in every way. Keep your head washed, bathed in water. Appreciate the child who holds your hand. This is the lot of humankind. Now, I did a little bit of research into this, into cuneiform, and I found a website that translated my name Nicholas into cuneiform. So, if there are any Assyrians, people who are fluent in Assyrian or Sumerian, I hope that is correct. But what is cuneiform? Cuneiform is one of the earliest known systems of writing, developed, as I mentioned a moment ago, by the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia. It involved pressing a reed stylus into soft clay to create wedge-shaped marks, which represented words, sounds, or syllables, not letters, syllables. The word cuneiform itself means wedge-shaped, originally used for record keeping. It then evolved over time to include literature, laws, historical records, and so on, influencing the development of writing in the ancient Near East. But how did cuneiform itself come to be decoded and translated? That's a story in itself. And let me select one of the many threads from that tale, and there's an Irish connection. Back in 1835, a British Army officer by the name of Sir Henry Rawlinson was visiting a place called Kermanshah in present-day Iran. He was interested in an ancient artifact nearby, the Behistun inscription, dating back 2,500 years to the reign of King Darius I, also known as Darius the Great, of the Achaemenid Empire. The Behistun inscription has a multilingual text carved on a cliff face. This inscription proved to be crucial in unlocking the secrets of cuneiform writing. Carved by order of King Darius I, it contains the same text in 3 languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. Sir Henry Rawlinson managed to decipher the Old Persian text, which paved the way for the other scholars to understand the remaining 2 languages. Also connected with this process of translation and decoding of ancient texts, there was the Reverend Edward Hincks, an Irish clergyman and a specialist in Assyria, the studies of ancient Assyria, who played a pivotal role in decoding the more complex Akkadian scripts, using his deep knowledge of ancient languages and comparative analysis. Hincks and Rawlinson and others were instrumental in enabling cuneiform to be deciphered, thus enabling the translation of thousands of Mesopotamian texts and the opening up of a new era of understanding of ancient Near Eastern civilizations. Here's another example. Here's the word patar. This is now not from a website. This is the actual way that it would have been written in cuneiform. Patar in the Hittite language, and of course Hattusa, the ancient city of Hattusa, written in cuneiform. Moving on, our next port of call was Mount Nemrut, which we climbed close to sunset on the 4th day. It's an ancient archaeological site famous for its massive stone statues and the tomb sanctuary of King Antiochus I of Commagene. The site sits at an elevation of over 2,000 meters and features a large mound of crushed rock under which Antiochus's burial chamber is believed to lie, though it's never been found. Surrounding the mound are giant statues of gods, animals, and the king himself, all seated and facing outward, symbolizing the blend of Greco-Roman and Persian cultures that characterize the kingdom of Commagene. And here we are, this is climbing up the mountain. And we were kind of on a forced march because we were trying to make it before the sundown. And I think we made it with about 15 minutes to spare. And this is just around about sunset. And many of these, as you say, these disembodied heads are sitting. I believe this is the one of Antiochus himself, which is literally at the summit. And it was quite cold. There was snow around, so you had to be bundled up against the cold. It was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987. And this prompted another short tanka-style poem. Summit climbed, an echo of youth, rising free with hope. Right, the next thing we did was we went to Göbeklitepe here. And as you probably know, Göbeklitepe translates as, I'm given to understand, pot-bellied hill. It spans an area of approximately 3,000 square meters, that's 30 hectares, which is a little over 74 acres. First excavated in the 1960s, but it came to the fore with the work of the renowned, sadly late German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who worked there in the 1990s and 2000s. And this is just some of the surrounding area here in this part of Mesopotamia near to Göbeklitepe. What is interesting here is this is a portion of the site, and we were told that only 5% of the entire site has been excavated. They've done, I think, drones flying over have mapped it out, but only 5% of the site has actually been dug out. And this is a part which obviously has been excavated. It's under cover. There's an awning overhead which protects you from the sun. And the people who organized it here have got a walkway which, you know, is very good for observing the artifacts here. And these are the T-shaped pillars. So you can be observing whatever's happening here. If there are any of the archaeologists, you're not getting in their way. But this is actually how it was found. And these are in circular shapes in this area around here. Let me just show you what. Yes. This is in the Urfa Museum, which is a life-size reconstruction. I told you a moment ago about the T pillars that are on the site. And these here have these particular designs which are now being decoded, shall we say, by archaeologists. And not only that, but they also have animals and insects which have been drawn on the face of these stones, and they too have a meaning, which again are being decoded. It is thought, for example, some of the research that I did on this is that these symbols here may refer to some cosmological observation. In other words, when the next, let's say, what's it called? I'm having a senior moment. What do you call it when the sun is obscured by? Thank you. Thank you very much. So this actually is counting when the next one will occur. Urfaman. One of the major finds as an architect from an artifact from Göbeklitepe was Urfaman. It's 1.8 meters in height and determined to be between 11 and 12,000 years old. It's carved from sandstone, looking like a man standing with his arms at his sides and his hands held in front of his lower body. His legs are missing, or perhaps they were never there in the first place. His eyes are jet black, made from the volcanic rock obsidian, and he's wearing a V-shaped necklace. The physiognomy of the head, arms and trunk of Urfaman is realistic, and yet simultaneously the minimalist approach to the carving of the sculpture gives it an eerie, otherworldly feel. Göbeklitepe and a nearby archaeological site, Karahan Tepe, are coming to be seen as two of the most significant archaeological sites in the world, which may in turn reshape our understanding of early human civilization. Göbeklitepe, dating, as I said, to around 9,600 years BC, is the oldest known temple complex, with massive T-shaped stone pillars forming intricate circular enclosures, indicating a highly organized and symbolic society long before the advent of agriculture. Only 2 months ago, I received a note that work on Karahan Tepe, which is a site near to Göbeklitepe, appears to indicate that this site at Karahan Tepe may be 3,000 years older than Göbeklitepe. That would make it a total of 14,600 years old. History is getting older. Ah, yes. Now, there were times when on the course of our journey, when interesting topics of conversation arose. And for me, as a never-ending student of the natural sciences, I'm interested in things scientific. One such topic was how in Europe that knowledge came from the East and was a contributing factor to the Enlightenment. And short story long, after doing some research, I came across this marvelous book, How Modern Science Came into the World. It was published in 2010, and it's by the Dutch academic Hendrik Floris Cohen. I want to read you a reference from this remarkable book. Excuse me for a moment. The Islamic realm not only encompassed large portions of the earliest Hellenist world and Persia, but also Central Asia, bordered by both India and China. A commercial free zone extending from Cordoba to the Chinese border, made wide and instructive traveling comparatively easy. Texts no longer written on papyrus or parchment, but on cheap paper, spread widely and were preserved all over the realm in libraries open to the public for the first time in history. These developments in the possibilities of travel, preservation and communication go some way toward explaining how the number 0 and the decimal place system could be adopted from India. How the Taoist idea of achieving longevity through the elixir could reach the Islamic world, and how in mathematical astronomy not only Greek texts but also Persian and Indian ones were translated. Now, there was one example that I just want to talk about. We're talking here about the passage of knowledge in general, but also my particular interest in scientific knowledge. And to make it easier for myself, what I did was I drew up this little diagram. And I just want to focus on one individual, if I may. This guy over here, Thabit al-Harrani, who lived in the 9th century of the Common Era in the ancient city of Harran, which we visited. Thabit al-Harrani was a polymath who lived in the ancient city of Harran in the 9th century. He was fluent in various languages and a close friend of the caliph, who was ruler of the region at the time. Al-Harrani translated key Greek works by Pythagoras, Euclid, and Ptolemy, influencing later historic figures such as Nicholas Copernicus, Roger Bacon, Leonardo Fibonacci, and Thomas Aquinas, who read Latin translations of the Arabic texts. What I found out in my research was that Thabit al-Harrani himself had been influenced by people and processes that predated him. And so he, if you like, acknowledged the work of Ptolemy. But Ptolemy also had the humility to acknowledge the influence of people such as Hipparchus and Aristotle, who in turn acknowledged the influence of the Babylonian astronomical diaries. If we then fast forward to Nicholas Copernicus and Galileo, they acknowledged the influence of al-Harrani. Isaac Newton himself is quoted as saying that I, as a scientist, have succeeded because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And it has been passed on like this. It's not. Whoops. Yep. Okay, we're good. Moving on now to the last part of the journey, which, if you may remember, we went from Mardin up to Diyarbakir on the river Tigris. And here is a map of the city itself, Diyarbakir. This is the route of the river Tigris. We visited the Mervani Bridge, and actually from the Mervani Bridge you can easily see Diyarbakir in the middle distance. Excuse me, this is the Mervani Bridge. It's not only called the Mervani Bridge, it's also called the Dicle Bridge, the 10 Arches Bridge, and the Silvan Bridge. It's the only bridge I know of, please correct me if I'm wrong, that has 4 names. I believe it's called Dicle Bridge because Dicle is the Turkish word for the Tigris. Mervani Bridge because of the people in the area. 10 Arches Bridge because obviously through the design. And the Silvan Bridge because I believe there's a village or town of Silvan nearby. It is almost 1,000 years old, spanning the river Tigris, and the city of Diyarbakir is nearby. Diyarbakir means the land of copper or the land of Bakka, depending on which etymology you prefer. The city was formerly called Amida. It is one of the most historically significant cities in southeast Turkey, a vibrant tapestry of cultural, historical, and architectural heritage. Known for its continuous settlement over thousands of years, the city serves as a living museum reflecting the civilizations that have flourished in the region. Diyarbakir's location along the banks of the Tigris has made it a crucial crossroads for trade, culture, and politics since antiquity. The city's markets, historic homes, and cultural traditions reflect its enduring legacy as a hub of Kurdish, Arab, Armenian, Turkish, and Assyrian cultures, creating a rich mosaic of identities. This is now standing on the Mervani Bridge, looking upstream towards the walls of Diyarbakir. And this is us in Diyarbakir. As you can see, these are the city walls. There's no retaining fence here, by the way. So my wife and our friend Farai were carefully standing away from the edge. But that's a sheer drop here from the edge of the wall. And this is inside the old city walls, which is obviously used as a park area by the public. Just want to read you this final selection from the book. We walked onto the bridge, and I gazed in wonder at the river Tigris flowing beneath us. Looking at this view conjured up a special moment in me. Here was another waterway of historic proportions instilled in me since early childhood. How many geography, history and religious instruction classes of old, back in Ireland in the 60s and 70s, has I sat through where distant foreign places, peoples and rivers such as Antioch, Tarsus, Sumerian, Persian, Euphrates, Mesopotamia and Tigris had been voiced, and these seeds of divine magic had been planted in my young brain, awaiting fulfillment all through my life. Now I was mentally pinching myself in the same way as when I looked upon the river Euphrates 4 days previously. Such happenings imprint themselves deeply on the psyche, especially at the age of 65 plus. As you get the inkling, you are completing a vast arc of learning set in motion like an arrow, shot from a bow more than half a century ago in one's youth. All was new then, being laid down on that young petri dish of a brain not only from direct experience but also from books, magazines, teachers, parents, older relatives, films, radio and television. Then one's life flashes by, and fortunately an opportunity arises in one's 7th decade of life to be able to visit these wondrous places that seemed so remote in the past. I also thought of those I'd known over the years, no longer around, who were unable to share this experience. It was a very moving and humbling moment as I stood on the Movani Bridge, peering down at the smooth running water of the Tigris. For some reason, I was reminded of Marcus Aurelius and his thoughts on time and his version of Carpe Diem. Grabbing that fleeting moment of passing existence, give yourself a gift, the present moment, which this former Roman general, emperor and writer had described in his meditations. I realized I was doing just that, enjoying the entire experience of this present moment, knowing my darling wife, whom I could never live without, was next to me, as were two very dear friends of long standing nearby. I thought of our 2 sons back home in England, that the morning around me was singularly beautiful as the sun shone in a cloudless blue sky, that my inner being was additionally comforted by the sounds of the music of nature as I could hear the river gushing by through the arches of this solid bridge which has stood for nearly 1,000 years. I looked up from the river Tigris, and in the distance on elevated ground I could make out the old city walls of Diyarbakir. Oh, footsteps, footsteps, should I follow thee? In my dreams, how will I ever know the way, the truth, the life, can reach those far-off horizons? In the morning, clear flowing energies of hope may fade, but the longing always remains, always. In sharing this evening with you to talk about my book, it has been a moving and humbling experience for me. Like Marcus Aurelius, I delight in savoring this shared moment with you. I'm most grateful for your attention. This talk is but a snapshot of the book I've written, where I've attempted to give you this evening a flavour of the whole story. Çok teşekkür ederim. Görev mile mahagwiv. Thank you very much.
Wow, what to say? I don't know what to say. Speechless. Thank you very much. It was a fantastic evening. It is such a literary evening tonight. I wouldn't expect, actually, to be honest. I am very excited, and it was a very moving speech and excellent presentation. And I think everybody now is excited to see the book, if they haven't done yet so. And thank you very much. And also, it is a great honor for us to host you here today at the Institute. And I hope everybody enjoyed as I did. And as you mentioned at the beginning, it is not only a travelogue, it is poetry, history, archaeology, and I think it is more than those you listed. And as a note, and also we'd like to thank Rashida, as you rightly said, and we also have a saying, there is always a woman behind a successful man. So this is here, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there is any question, obviously we are open to floor.
Thank you so much for a fascinating talk. I just wanted to find out, as you mentioned, you had read about the area. So what was the one experience, a place that surprised you the most, that something exceeded your expectations, that you may have not expected it, but it was more than what you expected? And the second question I have was that are there any, you chose Northern Mesopotamia, but are there any other regions that you'll be going to in the future? Considering the political situation and all, but are there any plans for other regions or other journeys in those range? Okay. Thank you.
Well, let me try and tackle, if I understood thank you for your questions. The first question, if I understood correctly, was anything that surprised me, one thing that jumps into my head is I remember when we were driving on the D400, and we could see actually, if I had a tennis ball, I could have thrown it into Syria. It's that close to the border. And our guide Murad was just telling us about what had been happening in the area, because we were there in 2019. And he then said, "Oh, didn't you know that there are hundreds of tunnels in the area?" And that kind of surprised me, because I had no idea that apparently there were tunnels, going between the two countries. So that was a big surprise. Another pleasant surprise was that in every museum that we went to, the explanations were in Turkish and in English. I was most grateful for that. And that was everywhere we went. So I take my hat off to the Turkish authorities for doing that. In terms of surprise, I think what really, I wouldn't say surprise, I think it was more in terms of being impressed, was that the people that we met en route were extremely friendly, welcoming, and ready to tell their story about their particular city or region. And for that reason, I was very grateful, because we had obviously Murad, who was able to translate for us. And in that way, I think personally, I learned so much. The second part of your question, do I have any plans? Not at the moment, to be perfectly honest with you. But let's put it this way, I'm sure I can dream up some kind of expedition in the future. So perhaps, watch this space, if I may suggest.
I want to criticize, but I cannot criticize anything. It's beautiful, really. But what about the music and the food and dance? It's part of every culture. We didn't see anything.
Well, yes. That's a fair question. The problem is what to leave out. There's no value judgments here. It was a question of how long is my talk going to be. But you're quite right. We came across, for example, a marvelous evening in Urfa. We went to a militan, and we had an incredible evening where we had local music being played and song. And while this was going on, I actually wandered around this caravan. It was a caravanserai, actually. And as I wandered through, there were these statues of obviously famous people, which I had never heard of, but I took down the details, or I took a picture of it, went back home and looked them up, and they're famous poets, philosophers, historians from Turkish history. So again, from that musical interlude that you mentioned, I learned something more about the culture of Turkey. But you're quite right. I mean, the food was amazing throughout. And the other thing was that as you go from one city to the other, Gaziantep to Urfa to Urfa, my favorite, onions. Yes, if you've been to Urfa, I learned something new. It's onions with everything. And the only problem is that I don't like onions. So it's quite hard, but seriously, the cuisine, what I loved was the variety in the different places you went to, whether it was savory or sweet. And it's something I would look forward to on future trips, knowing that when I go to a new place, I'm going to discover new cuisine.
Sorry, if you go to Saudi Arabia, they offer you sheep eyes, and you must eat it.
Well, actually, we've lived in Saudi Arabia, and I must say I've been to a number of dinners there. That has never happened to me, so I've never had that pleasure.
Nicholas, firstly, thanks a lot for the enormous, preparation you put into your presentation. It really shows, so appreciate that. I just had a few questions. Firstly...
Only a few.
Only a few. We're just getting started. But, we saw your beautiful notes there. Can you tell us a little bit more about the process of note-taking that a traveler like yourself would do? Would you note down every single thing, or is it something special? Facts and figures, or just poetry? Also, were you planning to write a book, or did it happen organically from your notes? So that's the first one. My second part is... how long do you have for the... okay.
No, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no worries. So northern Mesopotamia is quite big. It's got northern Iraq as well as Syria. Is there a reason why you chose to isolate your travels only to Turkey? And not the other parts, because other parts also have some historic cities, right? So we're just curious about that.
Okay. Let me take the first part of your question about how did I come to write the book, basically. It's a very good question. In all truthfulness, when I started out, I was just taking notes. Because, as I said earlier, I'm interested in piles of rocks. That's my, affliction or hobby or whatever. And as we were traveling through, on our itinerary through these various places, and I'm scribbling away, and I thought to myself, I wonder at the end of it, maybe there's a possibility of an article for a newspaper or a magazine. And that's as far as my imagination went at that stage. Because the other thing was that our tour guide, Murad, had a kind of effusive enthusiasm which was very infectious, and this came to influence my thinking. When you were, let's say, well, I can only say this for me, but I can remember the fun when you're learning something new and your brain wants to soak it up. You're dying to dive into that subject. Well, this is what Murad was doing. He wasn't just doing it for one subject, he was doing it for a whole myriad of subjects. And that is why my scribbling was scribbled, because I'm writing at the speed of light. As he's rabbiting on, I'm trying to catch. And I can't write. I wish I had 4 hands to write at the speed that he was speaking. I couldn't. So what I did was, I wrote, in some cases, just kind of a shorthand, which then enabled me to look up the references when I went to, I basically took up for a while residence almost at the British Library, doing research. Marvelous treasure trove of stuff to learn about this part of the world. And it's while I'm doing this research, I then, my thinking went from, maybe there's not just an article here, maybe there's a book. And then I was then struck with the other idea, but wait a minute, another travelogue, you know? So I then began, okay, put that to one side. Now let me read about other people who've written travelogues from that part of the world. So I went way back, 2,000 years. I read up on the master of this particular genre, a guy called Pausanias. And then I worked my way through the various periods up to the present time. And I hopefully was able to absorb over a year or two enough stuff to say, right, if I'm going to write a travelogue, how do I make it that's, excuse me, but it sounds a bit cliche, a little bit different to other travelogues? So I decided basically to put everything in there, including art, history, archaeology, poetry, etc. And that's how it came together. And I then had the journey of trying to find a publisher. And that's another journey. I could bore you with that. But thankfully, my publisher, Unicorn, believed in what I had written and took me on. The second part of your question, again, a very good question. We went to Northern Mesopotamia simply because of personal safety. Traveling in Iraq and Syria is, as you can imagine, problematic. Yes, I do know of people who have traveled through these regions currently and come out, you know, safely. But we weren't prepared to take that risk.
One more, and we can move forward.
Sorry, I'm going to be the annoying one who asked the follow-up question. So how did you find a publisher? Did you have a manuscript ready? Is it an Irish publisher interested in the Irish connection? Or what was that process like for you? Very boring for most people here, but very curious.
No, it's not a boring question at all. It's, I think at times when you are let's be frank about it, when you're an unknown author, and you're trying to find, I was writing not only to publishers, but also to agents. And I wouldn't mind if they answered back and said, your manuscript is a load of tosh, we're not going to, but you get this deafening silence, nothing. And I guess it was just a question of tenacity. I kept writing, and in the publisher that actually took me on, I wrote to them in the July of last year. I got no response. I always followed up with publishers. And I followed up in November of last year, and basically they said, come on down. And I remember hearing this on the phone, and I thought, am I hearing correctly? It's the first time a publisher is saying yes. So I jumped at it. There was no magic. It was just basically wearing out shoe leather, phone calls, emails, ad nauseam, to try and get traction from somebody who's in. Yes, I was doing my homework. I was looking at agents and publishers who specialize in this genre of writing, of course.
And did you have a manuscript ready?
Yes, it was ready. It was absolutely, it was done and dusted, including the photos. Yeah.
Was it the long version or the short version?
You mean of the...
500,000 words? Or?
My manuscript was when I sent it to the publisher, it was the long version. Oh, sorry, it was the short. It was the edited version. I beg your pardon. 65,000 words. Sorry. Yes, I get your question now.
Well, thank you so much, Nicholas, for this delightful journey, and thank you all for joining. And please put your hands together one more time.
Thank you. Okay, sure.